Hey, Fitheads. Today we talk with Gregory Hawthorne. He's a certified athletic trainer and a robot that can deconstruct your movement just by looking at you. This was so fun.
That was one
What
of
a
my
cool
favorite
one.
parts was when he was talking about how he sees stuff and like
Movement
levers and where
mechanics.
power comes from and body mechanics and stuff like that. And you were like, "Are you like a Do you have like cyborg vision where you see people?" And he was like, "Yes, yes, absolutely." Like you didn't even finish your question. He was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure." That was so funny.
Man, the amount of things that I'm changing with my health and fitness processes now is a lot. Like I have to adjust so much.
I
How
know.
crazy that I don't know. I feel like I learned a ton from him and it was such a short amount of time.
This is also one of those ones where he'll like describe your posture or the way
Oh
you
no.
move
Oh.
or whatever, and then you can't help. I noticed myself doing it and I noticed you doing it. Like you can't help but sort of like adjust your shoulders while he's saying things. And I mean, we did it. I bet the list you guys, fitheads are gonna for sure do it while you're listening. That like he's like, how your shoulder blades are tilted forward, and then I immediately was like, no, they're not. They're back here.
What?
And he's like, so you want to stretch like that? I'm like this? Yeah, it was like it's one of those things where everything he says, you're like, oh my God, yeah, that makes so much sense.
Also, I've been doing it wrong.
Also, we're organ meat sacks.
Just sloshing around.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Hey, Greg, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad to have you. Wait, is it Greg Gregory? Sorry, I didn't mean to be too familiar.
No, Greg, for sure. Like I know, I think my mom calls me Gregory every now and then. Let her
When
do
you're in
that.
trouble.
Maybe my wife. Yeah, exactly.
That's a gotcha podcast. So, Gregory.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. So, can you just give the Fitheads a little background about you before we dive in?
Yeah, for sure. Gregory. I'm Greg Hawthorne, athletic trainer. I live in Georgia right now. Born in Pittsburgh, went to school in Michigan, went to grad school at Michigan State. Um, I'm an athletic trainer by trade, and I'm in a non-formal position right now, like more private practice, which is growing for athletic trainers. I before this, first half of my career was high-level athletics. So I was in D1 sports, different colleges, and then professional football, NFL, for several years. Then after that, I worked with the Department of Defense, with the Air Force for about 7 years, primarily with mechanics actually, so it was a little bit different. Um, However, I realized the body's the same; they react the same way to different things. As when you're dealing with a specimen of an individual in Division One or college, like you can push them a lot harder, and you probably need higher stimuluses than you would with the guy who works on planes all day. And now I'm in a private practice with mostly youth sports, actually, some and mostly basketball. And I have a rehab with performance-based individuals, so like physique competitors, and as well as obviously the basketball guys I work with and other athletes. But I'm a father, have twins, and they've actually adjusted my thought process on the body because of we raised them the same, I would say, the boy girl, but their movement strategies are way different. You kind of nerd out a little bit when it comes to looking at them and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, that guy's a run for me. I'm all about just kind of helping people out as best as possible as I can in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, I think that leads right into who is the hardest to train, or I should say, who is the biggest babies.
That's a good question right there. So the hardest to train, no doubt, are the kids of the parents, or kids who don't want to be there and the parents make them come, right?
Yeah.
So that's always the hardest, right? So I have to deal with that. But like with that is it's fun because then it's like, okay, I know I don't have to do too much mentally. Like I'm not the pusher guy. Like I'm not going to be the guy who's like rah 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 rah. Unless you're the guy, unless you are already pushing yourself, and I know you need that little boost, right? But if it's me spoon feeding you, I'm not going to be that. I'm just going to change the activity to something that you enjoy. And so that's where it's like it's more fun with them to a certain point where I get creative. and I try to figure out games to drive the adaptations I want. So now it's like, oh, we're doing a ping pong, we're doing keepy uppy, we're doing some kind of chase, we're kind of do something like that to drive certain adaptations. And so I say it's hard because it's just more long term, if you will. Like it's for me mentally, I'm like, hey, we gotta get this going. I'm used to working with certain athletes, right? So if we're working with D1 professional guys, you're gonna have your guys. They make if they want to do it, they do it, and they can do almost anything you ask them to do. It's insane. But then you also like so with these guys, it's not that at all. It's like I have to trick them into doing things where that's how I was with the little kids who don't want to be there, but the parents want them to be there. And then you'll also have your high level professionals who feel themselves to a certain point where it's like they don't need anything, right? And it's like, oh, I'm the greatest thing there is, and really they're not half the time. These are the ones who are the greatest thing they are. They're humble. In all honesty, right? These are the best ones are humble. To a certain extent, they know how good they are, but they don't treat support staff, if you will, that way. Like they'll treat components when they're on the field, they're different. They're a different animal. But then you'll have the people who like that, and it's like you try to get them, like, because your job almost depends on it, right? Like if they don't get healthy or they don't um they're not seeing the field, and my job is to get the better, but they don't want to do what I have to do. Like I have to figure out a way to make it work. Otherwise, I lose my job per se because they're the money, right? And so that's where the stress can come a lot into them. So they're more difficult in regards to that. But a lot of times you show them that you care, and you got to play the give and take game, right? It's like I give you this, you give me this, I will meet in the middle. There's a word for that, and it's eluding me at the moment right now.
Friendship.
Compromise. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there you go. Compromise. Compromise with them. You can make the changes. Like that's when you got to get it going. So it's like it's a lot of psychology and revolves with that point. But that's what I look at. And then hardest to not train physique competitors are the worst at not doing stuff. I need you to not do this.
Yep.
They're going to do it, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you need to take a break. They're not going to take a break. And next, my arm hurts. Like, no shit. I told you to not do that. And you just did, 3 sets of 55, whatever it is. So,
55 for hypertrophy.
That's fun.
Yeah, that's crazy.
When you're dealing with clients, how hard is it when you're like people have different goals and adaptations, obviously. Well, how hard is it when they're trying to like get back on the field versus when they're trying to get better at their sport? Does that make sense?
it does make sense. So it's like you have someone who's hurt or coming off of something, and they're trying to get back to the level they were. And then you have someone who's just trying to get better.
Yeah.
And I always say, because I work with both spectrums, it's easier for me to get someone better. Because if you think about this general training, you have your certain constraints that you're dealing with, right? It's like, oh, you're built a certain way, your body moves a certain way, I have certain equipment, and I have all these things. And then you have an injury, so you're just throwing another variable, another constraint on top of that. So it's like just from a math standpoint, you're dealing with more numbers with someone who's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing about that is like, so I say that, then you're going to do the person in the middle is probably the hardest, who's not injured, hurt, still playing, but wants to get better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like they have that nagging thing. And those are probably the most difficult because they want to keep going, you want to keep going, but that little thing's holding them back. So they have to take a step back to actually move forward. And mentally, it's really hard for people to do that. And it can be difficult for you to do as well because you're dealing with them playing with this hurt, let's say hurt versus injured, hurtness. And so you're always like, I'm made to step forward. Then they go play and you're like, all right, now we're back 2 steps. So it's like this constant drill, right? And until the offseason or until someone's willing to take time off of the competition or, whatever they're doing. So competition can be if you're a football player on the field, if you're a physique competitor, it's not even the show, it's the training that you're doing for the show, right? The show is like the Super Bowl, right? The end of it, where the training is actually what you're doing. Take a step back from that is the hard part, right? Powerlifting, same thing. CrossFit, same thing. It's like it's hard to take that step back. Hey, look, you need to do less and like alter it, modify what you're doing to actually get the change. So those are really the hardest to work with because, like, look, you can't do that anymore. You can do this, but you got to make the change. So those are probably the hardest because people are always coming back too soon. Just had a conversation with someone, one of our guys out here, but basketball, older gentleman, and like, so he's So he's the guy, like the weekend warrior, right? I could have made it, and he's good,
course.
100% good athlete. Like he played in college, but like he didn't make as far. But he's actually pretty athletic. So now he's out with these kids, and he wants to show these kids what's up, right? And so he has an Achilles injury, and so I'm having this conversation with him. Was like the issue with people with like you is like he has a tendon injury, so tendon takes stress, right, to get better. And so we're at this point where he's like, okay, I'm feeling good, but I can notice it. He's like, I'm always getting hurt. And like we had this conversation, like, because this is a situation he had. Tendons need stress. So you'll have the people who don't do anything and it feels better. But as soon as they go to load it, pain comes back because you didn't train it like it needed to, didn't repair like it's supposed to. And then you have probably what you're like, where you do enough a little bit, and then like, oh, I start to feel good. And so then I go do like I'm gonna go play like I did before. And it's like, oh wow, now it hurts. 2 steps back. Then they do it again. I feel okay. I'm gonna play again. Boom. So you're in this perpetual cycle of like halfway there, stepping back and take 2 steps, halfway there, stepping back, halfway there for like a year, 2 years, 3 years. A lot of people just stay in this perpetual cycle. And this is that I'm hurt, not injured individual. Where it's like you have to give it that full 6 weeks. You need to give it that time for things to get back to where you are. Do a nice slow progression. Don't just jump right in. So those are probably the most difficult challenges because it's more of a mental thing than anything at all. And I mean, that's what most things are, just more the psychology of like getting someone to understand where they are and what they can actually do.
I hate to ask, do you find that there is one sport or activity that you get a lot more injuries?
I mean, in general,
like, do you find everybody who does basketball gets a lot more hurt, or is basketball like safer? I know this is sort of extremely anecdotal.
I know. I get you. So football, 100%.
Yeah.
If you play football,
You didn't say CrossFit.
That's what I was.
No. CrossFit's rather safe. If you run the numbers from a number standpoint, like I mean, it's
safe.
pretty low. Like
You heard it here, folks.
no, like it's fun to bash CrossFit, like but the community involved and everything else, like it's money. Like I have a big friend who's really into CrossFit. And I'm like, yeah, you got to do it. Sure, it drives certain adaptations, certain things, but overall, it's pretty good. If you do CrossFit, like just like Matt Frazier, how many times have you been hurt? Frowning, how many times he's really been hurt? Like they didn't miss
once.
They didn't miss games.
Zero. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they did it right. Like again, the people who get hurt don't really follow the actual CrossFit pyramid, right? You have this, you're supposed to do it all. And honestly, there's a lot of people who don't do it. And it's like, go play, go do the other stuff, be multimodal. That's the whole point of CrossFit, right?
Yeah.
But if you just go in there and smash weights all the time and you've never done it, yeah, you're going to get hurt, right? Because that's what's going to happen. But you have a good coach, you have a good facility, good trainer, they're going to set you up for success. You're going to modify. You're not going to RX every time. You know what I mean? You're going to do what you got to do to progress through. Like I'm not going to say that. I powerlift throughout most, like that was my main lifting was kettlebells and powerlifting up until I started doing sports. And so like we had some injuries there, but it's still low compared to football. Like if you play football, you get hurt. Yeah. Period. Do you get injured? Not necessarily, but you're going to have something wrong with you. I mean, you're running into people full speed. So like from all the sports, for me, it's football. I played rugby in college. It wasn't even that bad because you can't hit somebody as hard. Like, like you don't have pads on if you're playing rugby. But the other guy, football, it's just legit. This dude's running full speed into each other. Someone's gonna get hurt. So crap is not that bad. People say it, Do I think everybody does CrossFit? No. I mean, if I wanted to bash CrossFit, we can go, it's crush CrossFit, But it's like it's still it's something. It helps you move and it gives you things. Does it bias certain movement strategies? Yes. It gets you good at things. And
squatting specifically.
yeah. Get you good at certain things, but not so great at others. And if that's all you do and you stay in your wheelhouse, odds are you're gonna be okay as long as you sleep and eat right. The issue will come into play is like you're doing CrossFit super intense, and then you're a mom or a dad and you just had a baby, and next thing you know, you're rocking on 4 hours of sleep, and even that's shitty. And you're not eating great, you're picking up McDonald's in a way, and then I'm saying, I can't recover from these workouts, but you keep trying to do the same thing, then you have a breakdown. But guess what? If you went to the gym, you do the same thing. If you play basketball, you'll do the same thing. There is no difference. All these things are just more, and I'd say CrossFit's probably more functional. I'm not gonna say functional, like, that's a terrible word to say, but like more like what you do in life, from day to day, than like basketball, right? But all you did was play basketball, you're driving a very specific adaptation. If you don't do anything outside of that, you're not going to get good at those things. Your body says, hey, I want to get good at this, so I'm going to take away, I'm not going to be so good at this other stuff so I can focus on being good at this. I'm going to go try to do this other stuff full speed. injuries are going to happen. And that's generally what happens. And then the whole recovery thing, though, that's everybody in all activities.
How tough is it, or how much is it convincing people to sleep and eat right? Is that a part of the whole psychology thing? And you get D1
Yeah,
athletes
that's
being like,
so
no
hard.
thanks. Really?
No thanks.
100%. No thanks. That's that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, no, that's very hard. So we have these conversations with our athletes here, and it's like, and they're kids, and so um they don't listen. So we talk to parents, but the parents themselves, they don't do it, right? So it's like the household thing. But 100%. So we always try to bring up, you get your 8 hours plus if you can. Like if you look at the elites, again, I was like, you always try to bring the exceptional people involved, like LeBron, Steph, all these guys for basketball. It's like they sleep
They're
10,
sleeping
9
right
to
now.
12 hours. Yeah, legit. Like they're out. But they have the luxury of, all I have to really worry about is this, right? Like they
Wait, did
don't
you
have the
say
money.
9 to 12?
9 to 12
Like,
hours. Yeah. I think LeBron sleeps 11
wow.
hours or something like that. It's insane.
Is he
No, but
depressed?
I mean, he's tired.
He's tired.
He's tired.
Just like, I'm tired from
That's
succeeding so much.
all he does is run, work out, eat, and sleep. I swear that's all he does. But
Yeah.
like they say he sleeps like 11 hours during the season. Obviously, it's during the season and during heavy intense training. Um, and I think it's that. I mean, it's straight through. But I know a lot of people, go to bed at like 9 and wake up at like 8. It's 11 hours. It's just like it doesn't sound. It's not that when you put it like that, it doesn't sound crazy. Um, but like those guys. So we always talk about that, and I get they have the luxury of not having to worry about anything. When you have the job that they have, so their job is their sport, right? And so like sleeping is part of their job almost. Recovery is part of their job. But then they also have the financial situation where they don't have to worry about other stuff. They literally can pay people to do anything else they need. And so when I'm working with the kids, like some of them are poor, some of them don't have, the mess money, things like that. So it's like I have to appreciate that, they may be struggling, their parents have to stay up a certain time. He may have to help watch the kids or the brothers and sisters, the athlete. And so it's just kind of getting in when you can, like appreciate a nap here and there, that sort of deal. So like there's a lot involved when it comes to that, but it's like psychology, socioeconomic, things like that. Everything really plays a role when it comes to this whole movement thing and workout and all that stuff. And I just think people should appreciate that.
Yeah, and kids need more sleep than adults, and as you age,
Yes.
you need the amount of sleep sort of goes down. And I think that we read there's some book out there that says teenagers actually need to sleep like 27 hours a day or something like that. And so
Right?
I retroactively want to go back to my mom and be like, see, I told you I was actually doing something productive when I was napping all the time, when I was exhausted all the time. I remember there was an urban legend that if you start lifting weights too young as a child, it'll stunt your growth.
Remember that?
Have
I
you
don't
ever
believe
heard
there's any
that?
research that actually
Is that
supports that.
true? What are we talking about? Was that some sort of excuse so all the skinny kids could get out of going to the gym? Have you found
No,
that?
that's
Have you
that.
stunted? Are you going to stunt one of your twins' growth and see what happens?
Probably not. No,
You
I
have
don't think
twins?
so.
It's funny.
I'll test one. I'll train one, not the other, and see what happens.
Yeah,
That's how we do it to
sure.
see exactly how they grow.
That's
I don't think there's
for
research that
science.
supports that. Um, Overall, the theory behind that would be the stress on the cartilage increasing the density of it, and the bones will grow when it grow. That sort of deal. Um, so probably not. However, lifting at a young age may not be as worth it as it is as running because of the adaptations and like their inability to really grow mass. Because all like their body isn't set up to hypertrophy yet. If that makes sense, because of just how they're growing. Like it's just it just really like these things are going to stick like you want them to, nor will the training grow well because of they're growing, so nothing's stiff yet. Like so, their tendons have a lot more laxity to them in general. The tissues have a lot more laxity. The bones have a lot more laxity. So trying to drive that stiffness probably wouldn't be useful because you're constantly uphill battle. Where the better time is spent doing more body weight relative stuff, high sprinting, a lot of jumping, a lot of rolling. Those are activities that kind of stress more connective tissues thickness. And now your goal is to versus try adding muscle, you're almost trying to drive like tendon health and things like this because that stops growing at like 17. Like that's it. Like about 17 years old, minus like you have an injury, those tendons are going to stop really adding stuff to it, substance to it. And so your goal would be to focus more on, hey, get these stressors to it so you get a nice, massive, robust tendon and connective tissues. So then when you hit a certain age, now we start loading you up, start putting a lot more mass on you, and your tendons now are set up to handle that. At the same time, they can handle the springiness from an athletic standpoint. I mean, again, there's no research on it. In theory, it does make sense. Like, oh, I'm going to stress someone, but like, it depends. Like the bones really never hit each other unless you're like taking the barbell, like you're literally just jumping like a stiff leg jump. Like I don't see it doing that, if that makes sense.
So
But that was
stiff
the
leg
thought
jump
process.
for me. That's great. I'll start doing those.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. just drive this that. It just doesn't. Yeah, it just sounds terrible. It's like so. There's no research really on that. That's not something I really concern myself with. Like if my kid wants to lift something heavy, he can lift something heavy. If he likes it, like sure, lift him. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna take away from it. Just kids don't really care to lift yet. Push-ups, pull-ups, running, sprinting. I mean, I think that's the best. Hang, go play. Monkey bars, to bring them back. Those are where kids are gonna get the best development. Like my kid, I think my son hit like a 20-inch vert, like at 6 at some point. Yeah, he hurt his foot, and then now he's like 17 now or something like that. But like he's just springy. Like it's not for me. I'm stuck on the ground. But all he does is climb trees, jump, run. We have like a farm at home, and all he does all this crazy stuff. And it's like, oh, he's building it all up. I'm not concerned about him lifting weights because he does all the other things. And eventually he's skinny. Like he's a skinny kid. I say skinny, like he doesn't have he looks well built, but he's skinny. Like you see his knees are thicker than his thighs type deal, you know? You know what I'm talking about? Like they just look so all right. And so but he could do all these things, and I'm not gonna push him to lift weights yet. Where my daughter, she's strong as hell. She's more built like me. And she's she's a stout. She looks stout. Like you look you look at her, it's like, oh, she's gonna play softball. You know what I mean? Like it's like one of those things where she's big. Not fat, but just robust. Let's call it robust.
You mentioned you were watching their movement mechanics. Is that I imagine you're some sort of robot with a heads-up display, and you just can see a muscular overlay on a person and know where their energy is coming from and how they're turning their joints. Is you can diagnose just by looking that people move differently.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. So my kids, how they develop, it was more than just so have you guys familiar with Bill Hartman? He's a physical therapist out of Indiana, IFAS University, works with Mike Robertson, if you're not familiar with him too. So he's one of my mentors. And so he brought up the idea of there are archetypes, right? So the bodies are built differently. And you can see it, right? Eskimos versus the South African runners or the African runners, they're way different, right? And they're good at different things, right? You can't expect an Eskimo to go out and run a marathon. But at the same time, you got to have those African guys who go to up there where the Eskimos are. I don't even know if politically correct to call them Eskimos, Inuit. I'm sorry if I offend anybody. But they're freeze to death, right? They're just they're freeze to death. They're gonna be able to lift heavy things. It's just they're built differently. And so he goes in the idea of skeletal structure born with a wide versus a narrow archetype. And then based on that, it's going to set up how your muscles and how your tissues and everything else respond. And it makes sense when you go through the physics of it all. And so my kids are one's wide, one's narrow. And so think about a wide as stout, strong force producer in general, a little bit stiffer in tissues because they're just, shorter, squattier, if you will, relatively, where a narrow's more turny, a little bit looser, tissue's a little bit more bouncy. And so my daughters are wide, my son's a narrow. And so they were always about 3 to 6 months difference when it comes to all the milestones as kids, right? He start walking earlier, start crawling earlier, all these other things. And so it would make sense based on his ability to turn and twist, right? But then once he stood up, my daughter got stronger than him immediately. She's much more stable. She can roller skate. He struggled with it. Her legs burn out on biking. He can bike all day long. When they jump off of something, his butt comes down to his heels, when she hits the ground, it's boom, it's just stiff. And it's just, and they've always had these things. And she's stronger, but he can run all day. And they have these things where it naturally occurs, and it's based on they're raised the same way. There's no difference in that, but their bodies are completely different. And so I saw that going, and that drove me down to the journey of me seeing that before I knew what it was. made me like turn away or like go deeper in certain rabbit hole, especially with him, in regards to, hey, look, not everybody's just one size fits all model, right? It's like, oh, this isn't going to work for them. We're going to get you the results with them because they're just not the same. They're just built different. And literally, that's just what it is. That's why certain people are good at certain things. That's why all high jumpers look alike. That's why, the elite tennis player all kind of have the same mold. Or that's why all ballerinas kind of have the same mold, because their bodies are designed to be better at it. You can have your exceptions. Don't get me wrong. Like, you have those people who just are just, beasts, and they just work super hard and they grind to make things work. But then the people who put that together and have the natural ability, like, they're going to be the best because they're already set up. Like, they're not fighting themselves to do it. And so, like, I saw that early on, and that's I don't even know how we got this question, but that's what's really driven like a lot of my thought process in regards to like how these things work and my expectations when it comes to working with kids and everything else. So
it sounds like, and I'm sure I'm completely wrong, so this next answer to the question will just be I'd love for you to correct me on this. The like fast twitch versus slow twitch muscle, is that I mean, that might not be what you're talking about, but also I would love to get a rundown.
No, that will play a role, right? So like, it's not like, oh, so the muscle comes after, right? The structure of the skeleton, like, that's going to be first, and then this other stuff overlays. And so based on that, so like someone's twitchy versus not twitchy, right? Fast twitch versus not slow twitch, that will play a little bit of a role into it for sure. So like, you have your narrows, and on top of that, you'll have the people like who look like Superman, beat up, and they look like, the shoulders super broad, waist like this big, and they just walk around like, like your model type, if you will. They have the other people who look kind of like the opposite, where their bodies are smaller, right? And then their hips are really big, thighs are a little bit thicker, things like that. And so that's going to, I think, be a little bit more influential when it comes to slow twitch and fast twitch. I think the narrows are going to generally have more slow twitch muscles because of their tissues. So the connective tissues are going to be probably a little bit more loose and bouncy. And so when we're doing daily activities, they're relying more on a muscular strategy to walk. So it's like they have this constant contraction and relaxation as they walk. So the muscles have to do more work. So you have to have better blood flow. You have to have better, more slow twitch muscles to maintain life. And then the more you go with this pylon shape, so like a cone, right? The more that lower body is going to have to do that because they're constantly getting pushed into the ground because of just the pressure changes within their system. Because again, like, imagine I have to put force into the ground, right? When we lift weights, when you lift something heavy, what do you do with your breath? You hold it, right? You're like, you're bearing down. So you're creating this internal pressure. Imagine I'm trying to create that pressure, right? Because you have the diaphragm and your pelvic floor, they push against each other. Imagine I'm trying to create that pressure, but I have this big old bowl in the bottom, I have this little ass diaphragm up top, and I'm trying to create that pressure. So what I got to do, I'm constantly having to push into the ground. So I'm constantly on, and I'm constantly being pushed down to bear down as I walk. And so I have to use more muscles essentially to keep moving. And so I have more of that. Like, I have this constant force pushing me down. So I'm constantly having to essentially use muscles to walk and do things. And so I have a higher propensity to have more slow twitch muscles, if you will, more oxidative muscles. So you can say type 2 oxidative, right? Where if I'm a Superman individual, I see the opposite, right? I have this big chest, this big area I can push stuff into. And so I'm constantly throwing things up out of the ground. And this growing up, right? So think about when you're a kid and you're developing all these things, we're not really thinking about sports and just naturally doing things. I have this opposite. So now I'm pushing things down. It's like, I don't want it. I don't want it. So pelvic floor is constantly throwing your guts up. And so you don't have to use much muscle. So you're just prancing around the ground like it's nothing. And so your muscles don't have to do that much work, right? And so they end up being, well, we like to use connective tissue. So then they just drive the slow twitch or the faster twitch activities. And they just tend to be stronger and just be able to stiffen up a lot faster because it's much more energy efficient to use connective tissues like your tendons and like the stuff that holds your muscles together to move, right? And so they're going to rely more on that. So they don't have a need for slow twitch muscles, right? They don't have that need for it because they're not doing it. But then this is why you put those individuals on like a high rep program, they get smoked, right? Because their bodies just don't have the necessarily hardware to perform those. And so they but at the same time, because they're always bouncing, they tend to get stiffer and stiffer and stiffer and stiffer if they don't work on that mobility, right? And so that's where you have to have that give and take. But yeah, no, it does play a role. I think it's like you look at that skeletal structure, it's going to set up almost everything else. And it's like, why? Because physics. It's just we are gravity's on us, as cool as we are as humans and as advanced as we are in the brain, whatever it is, but we're still on Earth. We still have to succumb to physics, we still have to fight gravity. We still have these things in our body that we have to deal with. And so the body's just going to respond. You can manipulate it through training, but it's still going to respond a certain way.
It's gravity. There's no better gains than gravity gains.
That's it.
I think what he's saying is that since I'm a cone, I don't need to stretch.
That's great. Good for you.
Probably, honestly, a lot of it, like you probably need to stretch certain areas, upper body, probably get tight neck and things like that, squeezed. And then potentially in the hips, if you're working too hard, if you lose muscle, you start to squeeze to hold yourself up in general. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
for sure. I got these things right here that I always feel like I need to release.
Things,
I feel like
always,
I Olympic lift with my neck. Like somehow I'm using
all
my
the
neck.
time. I say you're trying to produce force, right? Olympic lift requires fast movement, right? Your tissues are lax. They don't create that movement fast enough. And so I'm going to pull it up versus push the ground away, And so you do the pull versus pushing the ground and it just kind of floats.
The robot sees me. It's true.
Plus, it's such a cooler feeling thinking you're pushing the earth rather than
100%. Exactly what it is. Push that earth.
Get out of here,
right?
Earth.
Move it.
Now, speaking of stretching, a lot of people, myself included, have this sort of hunch, forward hunch from sitting at a computer all day. Is it worth doing the other way, or do I do mobility, or what is the best way to attack something like that? Something like you were saying, like it's not something it's just something you didn't realize, but you do it every day. And then eventually you're just trapped inside and suddenly I'm a suit jacket smaller than I should be.
Right. No, I'm a big fan of respiratory drills or things like that. Because things are gonna get tight. And so I look at it as like stretching from the inside out, like I'm trying to pop a dent out of a car. And so the same idea is like you sit down, like so if I'm here and I'm rounded over, then imagine like everything in the front was pushed in.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So everything's back. And so if I do this, odds are I'm just going to lift the rib cage up and I'm gonna push through my belly. Right. It's hard to just, make that come up only. Good luck. Right. That's tough. You can lay on something like chiropractic adjustments or like you get like the little peanut, lay on that nice little crack on the back, a foam roller. That helps to loosen it up for a temporary time. But again, these tissues have adapted, they've changed, they've created. So what I like to do is like a simple drill where it's like you put your elbows on the table in front of you-ish. So about just a little bit lower than about nipple height, in front of your body, turn your thumbs out, press yourself away. And it's going to put you in a position where you get your abs working to kind of pull your ribs underneath you. Then you breathe and it's going to drive air up into your chest and your back, not just in one spot, and it's going to create like almost pop out this dent of this tight chest muscles, tight here. So you just here, turn your hands out, external like you do like fawns, like right? I turn it out, elbows in ish. Don't lift. You don't want to feel your chest turn on. Think about pushing the table away on an angle so that you don't turn your chest on, if that makes sense. So yeah. So yeah. Elbows down, press away. About let's think away from your body, so away from midline as you press just a little bit, and then a nice long breath out without sinking into the chair. So don't let your chest come down. Your abs should turn on, and then you want to keep those abs on a little bit, and then take a slow breath in through your nose. And your goal is you should get this to come up and your lower back to open up, and that's going to essentially bolster you up, pop the dent out of your chest, and then bolster your body so like you're floating on it. Right. And as you maintain these abs to help drive that change, something like that is very useful. The issue with like going all the way up, opening up like this, you end up just pushing through the low back. And so you have this posture, but now if you sacrifice, so you look more upright, but this is still tight. You still probably have like a lot of time the head's going to go forward with it, or it's going to come down with it versus being in between. But you're going to drive like your belly forward almost usually when you end up just coming straight out versus actually driving things up and down. You just drive things forward and back. And the goal would be to have everything moving and have the ability to go in all directions.
Wow. Yeah. It
and
feels
I say
like
this exercise here, you can do that anywhere. Hang on a bar, same idea, right? Sit on a wall. Like it's just that general position, anchored, breath out, breathe in, just make sure you're not hunching over when you breathe out.
It's funny you mentioned that because as I was doing it, I realized I wasn't breathing at all. I was like, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Can
You got to be able to breathe.
Is it important? Can you talk about the importance of breathing during exercise, stretching, everything? I mean, it must be the first thing people forget.
100%. Yeah. So like you work with someone, you go to stretch, it's like, when they come out of the stretch, and it's like, well, and you're stretching. You're stretching 100% when you do that. But you're also tightening, right? Because like in order for me to breathe, I have to get more stuff in my body, right? I have to get air in my, so things have to actually be mobile and get bigger, aka stretch, in order to do so. And so the importance of stretching or breathing is multiple folds. It allows my body to move and also helps hold my body up, right? So if I breathe in, it's like it almost makes me less dense, right? Oh, it does, like 100%. Like it makes you less dense. And whatever, how much does it matter? Who knows? But at the same time, your pH changes by 0.3, you die. So I mean, how much does a human body matter when it comes to different things, right? Like the body's very specific what it likes, and so the thought
You gotta
process you
stop adding
breathe
lemon to my
in.
water.
It's not you. Yeah, it's probably good. Yeah, the lemon water.
How'd she die? She
breathe
died
in.
doing what she loved, lemonade,
Yeah, exactly. Hey, at least there was a smile on her face. There you go. But when you breathe in, breathing is going to help things move better from a stretching standpoint. So if I breathe in, think about every breath in and out is like this little contraction, relax, stretch, right? As I breathe in, I'm going to put stress on it. As I relax, I'm going to take up that space. Breathe in, more stretch, take up that space. So it's like you're slowly inching your way down into that position is a way to look at it. Because everything has to move. It's not like, oh, my lungs just expand, right? If my lungs expand, like this, everybody's heard the song, the foot bones connected to them bones.
Sure.
And so like if my ribs go, someone has to, my shoulder blades attached to my ribs, or on my ribs. So they have to do something. My sternum's there. That's attached to my spine. My ribs attached to my spine. So then attached to my pelvis. So like you move, we're not like these individual parts. Like we're not we're one system. And so when I breathe from a stretching standpoint, I get more mobility because I'm stretching again, like stretch, relax, stretch, relax. So it's going to give you that. Where me holding, I'm just pulling on the same tissues over and over again. So I'm getting not nearly as good of a stretch as I would want because I'm focused on one spot versus the whole tissue, the whole muscle when I can breathe with it. When I do exercises, depending on what you're trying to do, if you breathe with exercise, that's going to set up your ability to either like holding your breath is going to make you stronger, right? Because it's going to make things stiffer. If I'm breathing as I'm lowering or trying to breathe in as I drop down, that's going to help me gain range of motion because, again, it allows my joints to move better. Okay. As I breathe in, it's going to allow things to move, shift. It's going to let my muscles relax because the air is going to help create this natural tension as I breathe in. And then I sort of hold my breath when I come up because I need my muscles to do more work because I'm trying to stand up. So it's going to buy this. If you're doing cardio, breathing allows the blood flow to go better, right? It's going to feed the muscles more energy. It's going to feed you more oxygen, right? So you want to breathe during high rep activities and cardio so that you can maintain, again, endurance, maintain reps, maintain times because they're going to cycle. So, I mean, it's pretty important, right? It's one of the main things. And this is honestly, it drives a lot of the postures people are in because if they always say, you can go how many months, or probably not months, a long ass time without food, a little bit less time without water. But people say minutes. 3 minutes without air, you have divers who hold their breath like 30 minutes, whatever it is. But it's like you don't go, you have to breathe, right? If you don't breathe, things, you die. Things go bad pretty quickly. And so your body's always going to bias that no matter what. So if you're bad at breathing, your body's going to do whatever it can to breathe. Fuck all else, right? It's going to be, hey, let's make sure we can get the air in. And this is why we hold these certain positions because certain positions are easier to breathe in. And we bias those positions when someone's tight. And this photo position allows me to breathe a lot better or easier because there's no muscles where I'm breathing into when I'm in that photo position. That makes sense.
I love that. You mentioned earlier that your organs are moving around.
Oh yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit? How much is my stuff moving? Where's my heart's? Where's my everything's? I think everything's in place. I hope.
Pledge allegiance, like
Pledge allegiance, right? Remember Pledge allegiance. Yeah,
Pledge allegiance.
Yeah. So like your organs are. Any of you guys hunt or anything? No, they got Carolina up there. So if you've ever harvested an animal, I'll put it like nicely.
Yeah.
Harvest an
Harvested.
animal, you'll notice that it's like the guts are like the heaviest thing in the body. Like you don't see people carrying whole caribou out of they empty it first, then they carry it because it's that much of a difference in regards to weight. And so we have guts too, obviously. And guess what? There's no muscles attached to those guts, right? They're just there. They're like a big ass bowl of water in us, and they just kind of slosh around. They're controlled by the other muscles that hold them together, right? And so when I breathe in and out, like there is no space in our body. If we get space in our body, we get cancer, we get something going on. Like it has to fill that space. Something bad happens with space. And so it's always filled up. So we got to appreciate that our guts are in us and are encompassed and packed in. So when I breathe, my diaphragm ascends or descends. When I breathe out, it ascends. So the guts go with that. So as I push down, now I push down, the pelvic floor should relax, da da da. But if I don't have like the abs pushing it back in, it's going to go forward because I have bones on the back of my body. Bones are stiffer, they're easier to not to move, right? They're going to be a little bit harder to move. So we're always going to go pathways resistance, right? What makes it easier? And so when I breathe in and out, my guts go up and down. If I don't have good abs, they'll start going like more forward. If certain muscles are tighter, they're going to start moving in those directions versus other directions. If my pelvic floor is too tight, it's not going to drop down. It's just going to punch forward. If my pelvic floor is too loose, it's going to sink way down there and hang out down there. I'm not going to come up. So instead of me creating space when I breathe in, like I need to create space in my lungs, right? And so if my pelvic floor is down and I can't get it to create the space to come up because it's already down there, I'm going to shrug this up to create space here, right? Like a vacuum. That's why you see these shoulder breathers because they can't get their pelvic floor to start to come up and they can't come back down. So, and this is where someone who's really tight or compressed, you start seeing shoulder breathing. So that may
Shoulder breather
at the same time.
That's my new favorite insult. The shoulder breather. Oh,
Shoulder
you're
breather.
one of those shoulder breathers. Ugh,
The shoulder breathers.
jeez.
My neck's so tight. They got these super strong. We should have my sternocleidomastoid mass. Man, my SCM is so huge. But and if you're moving fast at the same time, you got to appreciate like there's nothing holding in place, so they're going to slosh around. So like, and if you take a cup of water and spin it, that's what's going on with inside of you, right? I do this, but then I can manipulate how I spin the cup, kind of how the water moves around. I have a little bit more, obviously, you have a little more control because you have abs or muscles, but the same idea is like it just kind of goes with the flow. And so you got to imagine as I'm trying to do things fast and quickly, I have to control that, like catch this ball and throw it around, catch it, throw it, catch it, throw it. It's always on this little bit of a delay because if you think about if I move that cup, the cup moves, then the water moves, right? I get this like slosh up and then back the other way. And so we have to control that when we move. And so a big part of like exercise and performance is managing this. When you can't do that, you have issues like incontinence, right? I pee when I jump. Those sort of things occur. Or I can't poop. And that's where someone's just really tight and they're trying like mad to maintain the control of the guts. But like you have those issues when you can't control it. So now you just start getting leakages and things like that, or knee pains and you're just really stiff or you're just really slow and poor at moving.
I'm just a bowl of water.
Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
I feel like I'm
that's
sloshing.
Big old bowl of water in there. Just you can hear it too. I drink the water and shake it. And
Yeah.
It's in there. It's in there.
Well, I guess let's talk abs. What should I do for core? A, to be beautiful, and B, to hold on my organs where I want to hold them.
There you go. Take us
in
two
that
things,
order,
right? To be beautiful, that's your diet. As they say, abs in the kitchen. That's the truth. You gotta, you can have the biggest six pack in the world. If it's covered by an inch of fat, good luck. But like, so that's one of those things like diet 100% is going to matter when it comes to abs. But when it comes to getting the exercise to maintain as well, let's keep it real. Depending on how you are in general, crunches are going to focus on six pack. All right. That's going to get you any type of curling up activity, top down. So let's say upper body in, that's going to drive really deep, a really superficial muscle. So like the six packs, that sort of thing. And then what's that's going to do that's going to be counterproductive usually to the organ. So like, this is like, all right, you're going to be fighting that the whole time. This is why it's like, get to that. Cause that's essentially you're taking your sternum in the front of your pelvis and squeezing them together and it's pushing the organs like out to the side, right? It's just kind of moving them out to the side. And so you want to counteract that with things like side lying activities, planks, like side planks, anything of a side hold, carrying things on one side. And that's going to focus more on these lateral compression activities. So a lot of people are going to have six packs and low backs. Like that's all they got, six packs and low backs. And that's going to make them really, really smushed. And the thing about abs is you don't just want abs, you want a thin waist with it. But if I'm
Hmm.
smushing you from front to back, guess what's going to get wider? That waist is going to keep getting bigger. So you got to make sure you get the other activities that pull that in, cinch that waist, right? Snatch it up. But you got to
Snatch.
use your obliques. You got to use the obliques to do that. You think about your erectors, they go here and they pull things forward and back. And so getting those external obliques will be very important, which is going to be like counter rotations of the body, right? I'm going to rotate one side versus the other side. You want to do that sort of deal. Rolling activities are very useful with that, like arm, like get ups, things like this, side plank, standing. One type of activity I do like to do is like the reverse leg hangs. So like get the legs suspended. So instead of doing a crunch with the upper body, focus on bringing the legs up or the pelvis up. I shouldn't say legs, pelvis up, because that's going to be more like your stand, your walking face of gait, swing face of gait, which is going to drive these muscles that help reduce that low back tightness. One, two, if you do it right, not too heavy, and two, it's going to help get that pelvis in a better position, get a little bit more locked in. Being in this lengthened position, where now we're doing the opposite of gravity, right? So now I'm hanging instead of getting smushed down, and now I'm going up versus pushing down. So it's something that we don't usually do, and it usually gets things pretty good. And you get your serratus involved as well. So that's that the muscles that blend right into those abs. Essentially they're an extension of your external obliques. You have
Hmm.
that. So for me, it's a lot of side stuff with rolling stuff are going to be the biggest thing. Anti-extension, sure, whatever, side stuff. Let's do it from the side, not so much planks. Um, Planks can work if you have planks are okay. It's just I'm not a big fan of sit-ups straight up unless you're really focused on getting that. I would just offset that with something from the side as well. But those things are really going to lock in for me in regards to ab work. It's going to cinch up that waist and get you going. One of the biggest things when it comes to getting that cinch waist is removing back loads. So if you're really with that waist tight, the key is back squats are going to do the opposite of skinning your waist thin for most people. Because if you imagine I'm squatting, I end up arching my back. I'm pushing all the muscles, squeezing my pelvis, and I'm getting literally
Mhm.
my waist wider. This is where people fail when it comes to like, I'm trying to get my waist in. It's like where you're back squatting all the time. You're literally making your waist wider after you squat because it's too heavy. Go front load it, go zercher, go goblet, right? Go single arm, go split squats, go that instead because now you're not just squeezing yourself front and back, making your waist wider, right? You're going to start pulling it back in, squeezing from the side, making that waist more narrow. And that's where it comes down. I think people, a lot of people who are trying to get in shape, look good with their abs. I think people miss that boat a lot. It's like, oh, I'm squatting. Like, yeah, but you're using so much of your back musculature. Now you get your abs on, you're just squeezing yourself wider and wider, like legit. And so it's like, you got to get the sides involved a lot more and a lot less bilateral stuff, a lot less backloaded stuff because you already got that good. That's good. You don't need to do that anymore.
It makes sense then why CrossFitters just look like Ninja Turtles because they're
House.
back
Yep.
squatting and never doing this twisty thing. They're just a trunk.
Exactly.
I'm speaking about
See,
myself,
you said it on
obviously.
me. You said it on me though. Yeah, it's like, 100%. This is one of those things where it's like they look a certain way because it's everything's sagittal for CrossFit. It's very sagittally
Mhm.
driven. They've added like the obstacle courses and the bike, all the other stuff, recently into the games a lot more. But not most gyms aren't doing that, right? It's mostly in the gym working out sagittal plane activities.
Yeah. And when we're talking about breathing, Max just sent me a video that convinced me I should be holding my breath all the way through to the end of a squat instead of breathing out when you go on the ascent from a squat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just messing with my head. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I'm good with that because I think it depends on who you are. If you do CrossFit, that's probably going to be best for you, keeping that breath in. Because again, you're fighting gravity, right? If I breathe in, that makes me lighter, helps me stay up. And it's going to help my pelvis position as well. And at the top of the squat, you don't want to bias. It helps you start in a better top position, right? Because as I drop down, I'm getting smushed. And so breathing in up top helps me maintain that position better, especially if someone has a low back who's arched pretty good. Like they're already kind of arched in the low back. Breathing in is going to help counter nutate that pelvis and help them start there so that as I put pressure down, I'm actually like fighting it versus like just sinking and hanging out on my tendons. So I would agree with that. It helps feel that canister a lot better.
And then, well, with boxing and Muay Thai and that kind of thing, you're breathing on the movement, which feels so different.
You're breathing on mostly the contact is what you're shooting for, right? So it's like
Ah.
And so like your goal is to finish that exhale when you're making contact, because that's going to be where everything stops moving. That's going to be where I can transfer the force from my foot into my hand. Right? Grunting actually is a useful technique because it creates this gradient. Like, and what I'm doing is like I'm loading, I'm driving, I'm pushing my guts down or up, and then I'm releasing it, and I get this spring. It's like I'm pulling on rubber. I know it's crazy, right? I know I'm talking about the guts, but it's. I have a video on Instagram that kind of talks about it. But it's like you're pulling on the string on the rubber band and then letting it go, and you get that, and you get this exaggerated force as you do it. So that's what that breath is for. Like you're here, and you as soon as you breathe out, everything is tighter. Hit, and you got to breathe back in. If you hold your breath, you move slow. So me allowing some movement allows, but as soon as I stop that breath, it's like I just get really tight and I make that contact. And so that's why that breathing is useful when it comes to like contact, things like that.
This is, yeah. Now I'm seeing it as a punch is just a really fast squat. I was thinking that you were breathing on the movement, but really it's just like a squat where as you finish, then you breathe. It's just so much faster.
Yeah, shout out to all the grunting tennis community. They'll feel very
100%.
vindicated.
As I can say, exactly. That's what I think about tennis. I'm like,
oh yeah.
But there's a reason. Actually, I think it shows like performance increase with grunting or some form of noise. It makes you stronger. But it's a pelvic floor mechanic thing, not like a psychological thing.
Yeah.
Well, it could be both. It could be everyone look at me. Look
how
great I am.
It's 100% both. It's 100% both. I would agree.
Hey everyone, look how good I am at.
You said earlier, I want to touch on this because we kind of glossed over it. Functional is terrible. Was there something about how you didn't want to use that word, that it was terrible?
Yeah, because like people always say a functional fitness, da da da. Like, I mean, what does that actually mean? Right? Functional. It's relative, right? It's like, everything what's functional to me may not be functional to you. What's functional to a tennis player may not be functional for a boxer. What's functional for a basketball player may not be functional for a football player. And so, like, I have to be able to sit down and eat my food in a squatted position all the way down. It's like if I'm trying to play basketball, I don't want to be there. I lost. Like that's not good. All right. And so like I don't need to do that. It's not functional for me at this time in my life. Right. And that can change throughout your life, right? And so it's one of those phrases where like, what does it mean? Is knee extension functional? Well, if I have weak quads and I can't use my knee because my muscle mass is terrible, but if I squat, it hurts. If I lunge, it hurts. If I do knee extension, it doesn't hurt. How is that not functional? Because it's ends to a mean. And so the key is like, what does that mean? This is why I say functional in regards to whenever I say CrossFit, more daily life activities, right? We squat, we carry, we do these things. The issue is we also rotate all day long. And that's where it's missing some of that, but it does add general strength and general strength qualities, I think, in CrossFit, and I think that's helpful. The key is do other stuff. Make sure you live. Don't make all your physical activity sagittal. Yeah,
I refuse.
I sit at desk. I go to CrossFit, and I come back and I sit at my desk. Like that leads to pain. Generally, unless you're eating sleeping good.
Do you think that's what most people miss is rotational stuff?
100%. In this day and age, we don't get outside enough. It's my thing. Like me and you, we're doing this right now. This is where most people spend their day. Like I say, a lot of people spend their day like this. And so it's like they do this, then they go to the gym, squat, deadlift, bench, overhead press, hop on a bike. And it's like, what's that? Sagittal. But and like we don't, and like that's fine, like reaching the cupboard, but how many times are we actually reaching the cupboard? How many times are we doing these things? And it's not a lot. Right.
I keep my dumbbells in the top cupboard. So it's
there you go. Exactly. Right. So so like a lot of it, we lose that rotational capability, which just leads to like more just being stiff and things don't move as well internally, because everything's kind of spin, like blood flow, and it goes like, it goes in one side of the heart, in one side out the other type deal. And so like this in general, everything is rotational systemically. And then we focus our life currently in like a sagittal, everything in front of us, blinder vision on, versus actually seeing the world as it is. Like it could be, we can go very philosophical with it. At the same time, it's like, we just don't rotate enough in the gym. Like most machines are bilateral based and people focus more on that, which you can get big as hell doing that. So, I mean, that's what most people want to do. So.
Yeah, my life is portrait mode. I should
Right.
do more landscape mode.
There, yeah, you gotta do, yeah, that's it. You gotta angle it a little bit here and there. That you're doing when you're doing your
Just get
selfies.
2 phones and look at them
That's
both.
it.
Yeah, that's much better. Thanks.
Constantly, adjust. Hey, look, I need to get close up, in and out. Work that rotation.
Oh, that's funny. All right, so then how do I rotate? What do I need? What should I do? Do I need a
So when it
cable?
comes to
One
that, I would
weird
say,
trick that you're missing in the gym.
Bingo.
yeah, 100%. One word trick you're missing in the gym is supplement whatever you're doing in the gym. So like probably their bilateral stuff. Knock it down to no more than 2 per day, right? So 2 per day. And then after that, just focus on unilateral sides. Don't try to go into that side, maintain a certain posture and allow yourself to go into that. By arm, if you switch your arm work, even your biceps is like solely unilateral, you're going to help drive a lot of changes overall. Instead of doing leg press, back squats, don't back squat, front squat, leg press, knee extension bilateral. Don't even do knee extension. Knee extension consider bilateral. Even do single leg. Add a step down versus like a lunge, those sort of things versus anything else. And then switch up your squats from back, front, like alternate those as you need to. But one of the big things I would say 100% is just 2 bilateral exercises per workout if you're doing a big workout. Everything else, focus on, especially ending with more unilateral activities. All right. And then again, we talked about the breathing and the abs. You do the abs like that too. That would be very helpful. Now, if you're doing CrossFit, again, you can still do. That's the thing is like I always want to do like a ROM WOD, or rot rod or rotational WOD, where it's like twice a week, where it's like you keep the same thought process, right? But it's like instead of doing wall ball squats, you're doing wall ball lunges, or you're doing like a wall ball lateral lunge, where you drop down, catch it, throw it up the wall, and then switch sides every time, right? Med ball work is great, but like something like that, where it's like everything is now unilateral or rotationally driven for the workout, and just throw that in twice a week or once a week, and it's like that will help out a ton of people. Just in general, I get like the stretch and like the smash things and things like that, but it's like if you just did that extra thing, it'll be very useful. Especially when like this landmine pressing versus military press the whole time, like just little things like that would be very, very useful. You don't have to do the crazy, big rotational activities to get rotation. And the key is separating right to left, left to right, top to bottom every now and then.
Max, we need a whole twist day.
The rod wad. I love it.
Rod wad, yep. Rotational rod.
We need a
rotational workout of the day.
Week.
Rot wad.
I'm just gonna start doing single leg sumo deadlifts. That'll solve it.
I would love to see that. I don't know how that even looks. I would love to see how that looks.
Wait a minute.
Are chains useful for anything other than Instagram photos?
No, so for real. So chains are useful in regards to like increasing someone's like overall ability to produce force. Like you have those people who go to squat and like they almost like fall and they bounce out of the bottom versus like controlling it all the way through. So with the change, you get the variable,
Yeah, me.
With the change, you have the variable resistance, right? So as you drop down, it's lighter, and as you get up, it's heavier. So what this does allow is like we talk about the pelvic floor and things like this, right? So as I lower it down, it allows my body to capture a better position to produce force downwards. And then as I come up, I have to hold on to this force producing position a little bit longer. And so it's going to increase my ability to put force into the ground. So those who struggle with like stopping from a jump, those who struggle with like bottoming out of squats like too easy, like you would like they can get there up and down, but they like you see them swing and bounce out of the bottom versus elbow to like stop like a 90-degree squat. Someone whose knees collapse in a lot when it comes like jumping and landing. These are very useful because it helps them, the chains prolong the amount of time they have to put a heavier load into the ground. So it's going to train the tissues that actually stop them from going down a little bit more and a little bit better. So someone who's slow though already, who's strong and they can grind heavy weights, that's probably not the best for them. But when it comes to those who struggle, I think it's useful because you still be moving quickly with this weight, right? You don't want to slow you down. It's to be able to capture a better pelvic position and increase your ability to stop yourself from going down, and to help you get more and generally say like internal rotation or force into the ground mechanics.
I love it.
And also look cool on Instagram.
And also look cool.
It definitely looks dope. Definitely looks dope. You gotta wrap around your neck too, like you're Mr. T. As you do it, yep, with the chains on the squat rack. Yeah, that's the only way it works.
And
Static stretching.
I haven't. So static stretch, if you want to do it to feel good, that's fine. If you want to do it before you do other stuff, I'm cool with that. If you want to do it just to promote some blood flow, I'm fine with that. It most likely won't make you feel more flexible. And I'm not going to say it won't make you be more flexible because that's a lie. If you stretch long enough and hard enough, you're going to be more flexible. But it won't make you feel probably any less tight if you keep doing it. So like if you've been stretching, if you've had tight hamstrings for 7 years and you've been stretching your hamstrings, there's probably something else going on. So essentially all we're doing now is pulling on like the connective tissues of our body. So we're pulling on a muscle so we get that sense of stretch, but we're never actually adjusting the distance between like the end point of our like how the muscles are holding on. So this is where it's like I contract when certain muscles are going to hold on. The whole muscle doesn't fire right when I contract. Certain muscles are going to be on as I go to stretch. They're going to stay on as I stretch. And so I'm going to stretch, I'm going to pull on those tissues that those are connected in. But the joint positions are probably going to stay very similar. So it won't actually increase my range of motion within the joint. But it will help drive fluid into the joint a little bit. It's going to stretch out your connective tissues, but your muscles position most likely isn't going to change with that stretch. However, it may give you a window of opportunity to increase that range of motion, which is why it's like, oh, I'll stretch before I start. It will make you quote unquote slower, right? Or less powerful for about 5 minutes. But your goal is to feel looser. So like, what's the point, And so like you would do that and then go lift. I wouldn't necessarily go stretching and go max sprint, right? First out the gate, give it 5 minutes and you'll be fine. But like stretching, going to like a split squat, going into like a lot, it should help. As long as you maintain, because it's going to delay your ability to transfer force, which should help with you getting more better joint positions. But overall, stretching itself is probably not the best option when it comes to increasing your range of motion.
What is?
Breathing. We just talked about it. We just talked about the beginning. It's going to getting the thing set up. So the key with these is like, that's a loaded question in regards, but I'm talking about getting the dent and getting everything moving, right? So if you get yourself in a position that you have access to, so like if you go to a split and you feel like the pain in your knee right away, like people do the squats and like, oh, I feel in my knee, it just feels tight. Odds are you're just twisting, like your muscles are staying tight, and the capsule is moving and like all the connective tissues are moving, where you're not getting this nice twist within hold on. One second.
I think he's getting a pelvis. Oh, wait. Is there Bluetooth headphones? Oh no.
He's getting a pelvis. He's picking up a dumbbell from the cupboard.
I'm gonna say balloon. What are you gonna say? Pelvis.
There you go. No.
Oh, I thought his kids needed help with a workout.
They were here.
And he was just...
No. So like you'll have this. Right, I only pulled it out because you said I was gonna pull it out. But like, imagine your. I say we're on a podcast, so I usually don't pull these things out because listening. But I get the YouTube channel. It's you.
Yeah,
we got the.
But overall, so what I'm gonna do is like, if I'm trying to get my hamstrings loose, right? They attach to the ischial tuberosity, right? So a little butt here and they attach here. And if I stretch, I can pull my leg straight, right? But this may stay here, and this may just do a movement where the hips and the femur, so the leg, they just move together. Mm-hmm. So like I'm getting a stretch maybe down here, but I'm not addressing this tight spot that's holding me in spot. Or I may be stretched already, which is a big thing. People feel tight, but they're already in this position. So like say I'm anterior pelvic tilted, right? Or I'm forward. And so my hamstrings now are in a point where I'm already stretched out. Guess what? It feels tight because I'm already stretched out. So when I stretch, guess what? It feels better because I tell my body, hey, look, chill out. I'm already in this position. So it relaxes. But I've now created this stretch in this tissue. So now I've taken away the ability for that tissue to produce force overall. And so now the overall goal would be that. Oh, sorry. I was on the other question. So the breathing, that's where we're on now. Sorry, that's where we're supposed to be. On breathing. So in general, what I'm going to do is if we talk about this moving, right? And again, minuscule. Let's talk about the pH and things like this because the smallest details matter, right? So like people say you only have so much movement within your pelvis, correct? It's like, oh, you only got this much millimeter. But have you ever tried to fit a pipe that literally has a chip on it into another pipe? It doesn't work. It's the most frustrating thing in the world because visually they look right. But guess what? They're not going to go inside of each other, right? And the same idea is like your body has these slight things where if I have a movement, I may have pressure only in one spot, so it hurts. But when it comes to breathing, the reason I say it's like stretching from the inside out. It creates space internally. It helps me open things up. It helps everything move within the system. And at the same time, it helps decrease my density, helps me get bigger, stretched out. The tissues get to expand more. And then we talk about how all that breath matters overall in general, right? Increased capillary beds, all these other things are going to increase range of motion because it just gives you more space, more fluctuation, less rigid stuff within your body. And so I say breathing, but the overall idea is like drive things that are going to increase fluid flow within your system, increase blood flow, increase airflow, increase synovial fluid flow, whatever you want to do. Like, anything that's going to increase fluid flow will increase your range of motion, make you feel looser. Stretching moves it around. It doesn't increase what's in your system, if that makes sense. Like I'm just moving it to a different area so I don't feel as bad. But in the long run, in the end, it ends up being detrimental unless that's your job to be like a like Cirque du Soleil contortionist, right? But you also have strength training on top of that, right? You can't just stretch, so you end up tearing something, and that's where it comes down to like increasing fluid flow in general. Breathing just helps with that on so many levels, psychologically, from a neuromuscular, from a neural system, popping the inside out, getting more oxygenated blood, getting more blood to your muscles. So it's just very useful. And positional based stuff is very, again, knowing where you are, driving changes as you maintain a lot of contacts on the ground. So like if we talk about the foot, people talk about have a tripod foot, the ball of your foot, the ball of your pinky, the heel on the ground. If you maintain that and able to move and breathe through there, that's going to let us know we're getting air almost everywhere. Versus like if I'm just on the outside of my feet all day long or on the inside of my feet all day long, I know I'm pushing things in one area, right? If I can get that whole foot contacted through motions, I know I'm getting space and movement everywhere because that foot is a good tell of where I am in space, right? If my body's really far forward, I'm gonna have weight on my toes, right towards the front of my foot. If my body's really far back, I'm gonna have weight on my heels. If I'm turned over to one side, I'm gonna have weight on the outside of my foot. And this lets me know what muscles are on. And since I have to stand up, right, I'm going to have certain muscles on so I don't fall over because again, you don't want to fall over. And so that's naturally going to do that. So if I can maintain this foot where my body's kind of centered, that's going to help me understand and appreciate that when I breathe in or when I do exercises, I'm getting fluid flowing everywhere, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Are you a proponent of like aggressive breathing, like Wim Hof?
Like Wim Hof, for performance, I think it's useful. But I wouldn't say for range of motion stuff. I mean, I say that, if you're a terrible breather, I know this sounds like the BS, right? It's like, oh, like, how do I know how to breathe? I'm alive, right? It's like, yeah, also your
Yeah, you hit the
cancer, what's happening
minimum.
here. It's like, it's a certain thing. Yeah. Just because you have it, you're doing it, but you're not great at it. And I understand where that comes from, but again, the research is just out there in regards to like how poorly we normally breathe overall, and especially in the U.S. And then versus like how much it can help us overall when it comes to just generally feeling better. I'm a huge proponent of that. And I would say nasal breathing is probably what I would more focus on. Nasal breathing, at least in and out, sure, but at least in your nose. And the research on that is crazy high. You can read that book, Breathe, and that kind of help people understand it. I think it's a good book. But Oxygen Advantage is also pretty good, I think, on that too. McKeon. And so I would say no, but Wim Hof, 100%, I get you sympathetic like crazy, right? The Wim Hof breathe, like it increases like the heart rate, get your blood flowing like crazy to the peripheral system. So like if you're ready to go like hunt a lion, you know what I mean? Yeah, go ahead and knock it out. And I say hunt a lion, like work out, something like that, go ahead. You can overstimulate yourself where you pass out, right? Of course. So you gotta be careful on getting the range. But it is some work because the issue with that is like you work CO2. If you increase your CO2 tolerance too high, you can you pass out because your body won't breathe when it needs to breathe because like, oh, we're good, we can handle this, but no, we need more oxygen, and you'll just pass out. Like I think that happens at like higher level like elite, I think CrossFitters sometimes can mess with that a little bit when they get too far down that rabbit hole.
Whoa. That's
yeah,
crazy.
it helps you go. It helps you go. Like it doesn't, you don't get starved for air. You're not freaking out, and so like you can maintain a tone. But it's like you need a certain amount of oxygen, and so the issue comes down to the CO2 is what tells you to breathe. It's not oxygen. It's not that you don't need oxygen. Like you have too much CO2, so you need to unload it. But if you get too used to that CO2, then your body can like, oh, we don't need any air. It's like, oh, you need oxygen. And then next you know, you pass out, So that's where that Wim Hof can have its plus and
Oh.
minuses. But again, I don't mind at all. I think training any type of breath is useful. Like just pick one, go with it, and then if it works for you, go from there. Like I don't think you have to be that specific for most people. Now, like I use more like positional breathing for rehab purposes. I'm not like a breath guy. Um, but it's very useful when it comes to improving range of motions. As I mentioned before, it's just that constant changing of shape within your body as a whole positions. And then, but all the like the box breathing or Wim Hof or like there's some other or like the diaphragms doing the like the vacuum stuff work. I think that's all very useful to getting things to move around. And that I think that's what allows for a lot of this help overall. So just pick one that works for you, even if it's just sitting there and like breathing for 5 to 10 minutes to get used to it. I think research just came out too. I was listening to radio, and I don't do all the research, but like what John Tesh was telling me on the radio that 20 minutes is actually a long time. 20 minutes a day, breathing decreases your rate of Alzheimer's by like 70%, or a chance of Alzheimer's like some stupid high percentage. And if like for 30, if you do 20 minutes a day or two sets of 10 minutes, I think, or 20 minutes a day, one of those for a month, it drops your risk of Alzheimer's by 30 to 70% or something like that. Just
That's
breathing,
crazy.
focused breathing. Yeah. And that was like a 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out deal. That's it. And I guess again, this is where it's like, oh, I breathe fine. It's like, but do you? But do you breathe fine? Like it's just there's all this research coming out
But
there. It's
do
crazy.
you?
It's insane.
Wow.
Awesome. So, but yeah, that's me. And then all your exercise should help increase your range of motion in general. If we put everything together we talked about in regards to like breathing as we move, breathing as we exercise, breathing as we do that, that should increase your range of motion. If you maintain those foot cues, breathe in as you're doing it, breathe out as you come up, hold your breath as you come up if you need someone who's really tight. But having that breath cycle move up and down, that should increase your range of motion without having to add anything extra. Again, as you add bulk, if you're trying to go for like physique looking and putting a lot of muscle, you're not going to be able to do that because it's going to decrease your ability to put on mass. And so like that's why I say do a couple exercises first, in with this more bilateral stuff, maybe even in at the very end with some breathing stuff with the exercise, it's like lighter versions of what you're doing, and then end on that so you reposition your body to a better position after you've already stressed it and stimulated it to grow.
So the reason, Max, you can't touch your toes is because you're not breathing. Come on.
You can't touch your toes?
No, I've never been able to. I'm getting closer, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And I've started I started just doing like a follow along stretching routine that I found on YouTube, and I'm getting close-ish, I guess, but not really. And now
Like
what
how
I
far
do
off are
is
you?
when I do yeah, it used to be like just like mid shin, and now I'm like a couple inches off my feet, off my toes, maybe. Now what I do is when I work out, and I have a 1 minute timer for a rest period, and I just like put my foot up on a I just put my foot up on something and just stand there. So one leg up, and then at the end I do a sort of a stretching routine that I found, but I don't know what I'm doing, and it's pathetic. My shoulders are real bad. I've been tight my whole life. I don't know. And I played sports. And so, I spent
No.
I spent the beginning of every practice for 8 years stretching. Nothing happened.
Nothing happens. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like I say, you do that drill we talk about. I would say bang that out, like 4 sets of like 5, 6 breaths. They say you should be able to drastically increase your ability to touch your toes.
That's great.
Whoa.
And
Yeah.
not get
Like,
dementia, apparently.
yeah, not to get exactly. That's the big plus right there. That's that was crazy. That I never heard that study before, and I don't know if that's new or
Oh, I'm definitely looking it up. That's cool.
yeah.
And well, when you were showing the pelvis and talked about how you may already be stretched, isn't that like all of us? Because we're just sitting all the time and our butts are just, weak
It
and
is a lot of
stretched
us.
out.
100%. That is a lot of us. That's most people. That tend to like most people. When I say hamstrings. There's very few people who need to stretch their hamstrings, right? They feel tight because they're already tight. They're already stretched, and that's 99%. I say 99% of people. I mean, it's ridiculously high, and so like odds are you need to turn them on so they feel tight, so they feel less loose. Like they need to get closer together when you're hanging out, so that they feel not tight, so they actually have somewhere to go, right? And so like that, I would say like a simple one, I do PRI, Pressure Restoration Institute. They have a 90-90 hip lift. And I do think that's very useful for that as a good starter position because it helps us drive, get the hamstring turned on a little bit more, get your body in a better position, and then you're breathing through there. And that's where just lie on your wall. You can Google it. There's probably thousands versions of this on YouTube by everybody. This is one of their base programs. I do find that pretty useful. But sometimes people are just too tight and like they'll get in that position and you see their butt just kind of roll up. It's like their abs turn on, like their six pack. And I talked about before, we're just getting smashed again. It's like their hips are so tight they can't even get that position. And that's where dropping your feet down to the floor or getting further away from the wall, just bring your hips less than 90 degrees. So like about 60 degrees or so. And then do the same idea, same thought process, maintaining those foot contacts we talked about. Full breath in, pause, slow breath in through your nose. Don't let your back arch. Feel everything relax. Try to have the most relaxed breath in and relaxed breath out, but full, if that makes sense, all the way in, all the way out. Those usually help maintain while you're just maintaining these foot pressures and the light pressure into the wall or the ground. Those will help turn those hamstrings on to get them in a better position so they just don't feel so tight.
Wow. Interesting. And Max, did you have we were talking about this before you came on, so the concentric versus eccentric, which is all over all the Instagram bodybuilders captions.
Oh, yeah.
We'd love to hear your take
are
on
they?
that.
Is it really?
I mean,
so
it's
I
the
have
secret.
a whole muscle course.
It's
yeah,
the
the
secret
secret
that you've never thought. That's the one secret you're not paying attention to.
Well,
your
they
friend
say-
needs to help
tell me.
you overhead press so you can, yeah.
Oh, so we're talking about okay. So in my circles, right? Because I have
Because you know smart people.
On a little, so like concentric and eccentric are more of I talk about like muscle positions. So like concentric muscles are like short muscles. So like not the hamstrings, but the quads. A lot of times the quads are gonna be concentric, right? They're gonna be tight. They're gonna be on. They're closer together. Where eccentric is lengthened, not closer together. And so the concept though is eccentric versus concentric is like eccentric is lowering, right? Concentric is overcoming. So I'm pushing into things. And so when it comes to that, you're driving different changes when you go to that. So like concentric activity is really focusing heavy on getting the muscle to turn on and shortening, right? I'm trying to push fluid into that muscle, turn it on, move what I'm trying to move. Okay. And that's going to drive more of a stiffness. It's going to drive more of a blood flow because I'm trying to get blood into that muscle, which you want, right? When you're lowering, the whole point of like your growth is going to come from that eccentric mostly. Because what I'm doing is I'm holding on for dear life, and then I'm pulling it apart, and they're like, "Oh Lord, don't let me pull apart," right? And so that tells your body like, "Oh shit, we need more muscle because we're gonna break if we don't." So that elicits that response. And so when you do eccentric activity, the same thing happens. I'm maintaining this concentric position of the muscle, and I'm trying to do it as hard as I can, but now the muscle is maintaining that and this is getting yanked. So it's stretching, what you call yielding, giving way under that force. And that's going to elicit the body saying, oh crap, we need more muscle to hold ourselves up. And so that's why it elicits that response. So yeah, the growth factor comes primarily from a myofibular standpoint. So like the stuff that does the work in the muscle from the eccentric portion of it. This is why you have to go close to failure for hypertrophy no matter what. Right. So like you don't have to do eccentric only. Just get close to failure because then you're gonna get it as you do the reps. Right. But like when you have this, the issue with understand what you're gonna get with that eccentric training is you're driving a lot of stress to more of the connective tissues. You're driving a lot of positions where you're trying to stay short and it's making you go long. And so that's going to bias you in that short position. So it's going to take away range of motion potentially in the joints, potentially though increase it within the muscle itself. So you get more movement through the muscle itself, but the joints won't. So it'll be like I'm doing this with my shoulder versus doing this with my shoulder, if that makes sense. Like my arm is moving on my shoulder blade versus my shoulder blade and my arm moving together. And so you'll get a lot more of that shoulder bladed arm moving together with eccentric. So that can lead to like stiffness, pain. And so, but if you could offset that with that stuff we talked about at the end, where you end with more of what we talked about before, the breathing, the foot contacts, things like that to offset that. But then you've already elicited the growth response. So 100% growth is pretty much going to come from the eccentric portion of the lift. So You can do all you want, but you do want that concentric because it's going to drive blood flow. It's going to increase capillary. It's going to increase some other things as well, and stress internally in the connective tissues of the muscles is going to help. It's going to give you room to grow. That's what that concentric is going to do.
So I'm an idiot for my final overhead press, just letting it go and dropping it to the floor.
If you're trying to go muscle, let it come. Yeah, control it on the way down.
Bring it back down.
You want that hard rep. Yep, you want that hard.
That's the last one, the one that you're like, fine, I'm done.
Yeah,
that's the one we really need to focus on. Great.
Yeah, that is. That's the one you want to focus on. Yep.
Rehaul my.
And you don't have to go to failure. And you don't have to go to failure. Go close to failure. That's the thing. The risk reward for most people going to failure isn't worth it, because then you can't lift again because your body gets too damaged. Because you don't need damage to grow muscle. You need stress. And there's a difference. When you damage things, because you're only going to grow what you recover from, right? If I tear things up, I have to repair all that before I start to grow again. So you want to just do enough that says, oh, damn, we need more. And then that's when then you get to grow from there. And so like close to failure, 1 or 2 reps left is what you want. And that's on this part, the lowering part.
Yeah.
Not the up part. Yeah, the lowering part.
I've been doing it all wrong.
I need a time machine so bad.
God, I'd be yoked.
Yeah. We can't move and pain and be huge at that point.
Wow. Well, this has been enlightening. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Oh yeah. Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I feel like we just talked about nonsense, but not like nonsense. I feel like I didn't say anything useful. Like that's my only issue with this. Like I feel like I was like, oh, nothing is useful in here. That's it. But
I find
you changed how I'm gonna breathe, how I'm gonna lift, how I'm gonna pull things from a cupboard. My gosh.
I appreciate it. That's it. Hopefully it is useful. I try to say what I say, try to give some actual things.
Yeah.
It is kind of hard sometimes, I feel like, when it comes to laying things out in generalities, right? It's like, oh, what is this for you? Like, well, what works for you may not work for somebody else. So it's like, I'm gonna tell you how to do this, but it may not work for you, right? And it's like, because you're just built different. This comes out of those archetypes that we talked about earlier, right? The wide versus narrow, or this and that. But like overall, the things we did talk about are pretty general, I feel like, and I guess they are useful. Yeah. So yeah, you're definitely gonna get stuff out of this for sure. I'm just
I did.
I'm a negative Nancy.
I'll see you in 1 week when I'm super jacked because of all that I got out of this.
That's right. 1 week. That's right. That's all it takes is 1 week.
Okay. And where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me at Thorne Training and Therapy, Instagram. My website is thornetrainingandtherapy.com. On that website, I actually go into a lot of these concepts we talked about. I have a webinar or a masterclass on like muscle physiology, how moves created and adapted. I'm probably going to throw up the course from the Sleep and Recovery Summit I talked about with using like bands and chains and things like that. I'm probably going to put that on those for if you buy it, you could access that as well. But that's on the course, and the course goes into essentially the different thought process of how muscles use. Again, we talk about the eccentric lifting. We talk about how muscles don't just pull, they push the bones a little bit too. Eccentric orientation, overcoming yielding, kind of how to grow muscle versus move fast, all this other stuff. I go into there on that as well, but primarily I'm on Instagram. I teach a mentorship, AMP mentorship at AMP Education on Instagram as well. That's Sean Astorga. I always screw up his last name. My boss's last name, right? We're on there. And then One Step Away Athletics is OSA Athletics. I'm the director of off-field performance, so do rehab and conditioning for them, and we're on there as well. That's in Warner Robins, Georgia. So yeah,
awesome.
That's where you can find me.
Well, thank you again. This was super fun.
I'll send you an email with all that. Mm-hmm.
To all our listeners, if you can rate and review on Apple Podcasts, that helps us out a whole lot. And we'll see you next week.